Some of you don't know Narayan and Dharmadevi. They are our spiritual directors of Southern California. They also help lead all the centers, and we are very happy to have you both.
Thank you for having me.
Saying in India, in the East, that there's no higher religion than truth. And many of us in the West are probably familiar with the words of Jesus Christ. He said, "The truth, know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." Well, I was thinking, well, what is this truth that we hear about, that great saints and great scriptures talk about? But what is that truth that will set us free? What is that truth that is higher, that is the highest religion? Well, it's this chant, was really the answer to that question. And what Keshava was sharing at the end there, that we come from this joy, we were made from this joy, and we were made to experience joy and to share it with others. It's so simple, right, that we feel like, well, it can't just be that simple. This whole symposium today, right, was how to be happy all the time. Well, we were hoping you have the answer by now, but it's that simple. But of course, life isn't. What does life throw us? What does Krishna say? "Oh, Arjuna, get away from my ocean of suffering and misery." Yeah, I grew up in an Italian Catholic family, and I had an older cousin, a young girl. She was 12 years old at the time. Her name was Joanna. She was she was an old soul, right? There was one time where my aunt and her mother and her were watching a soap opera. It was called One Life to Live. It's like that, many of you have heard that story Swami used to tell of that man who was in the military base, and he's part of the military, and he was going around and picking up different pieces of paper. He said, "No, that's not it." He said, "No, that's not it." I said, "This guy must be crazy." So they sent him to the psych ward, and the psychiatrist started to evaluate him, and he was at the front of his desk, and he was picking up paper after paper, saying, "No, that's not it. That's not it." And the guy said, "Medical discharge." Ripped off a piece of paper, he gave it to him. "That's it." He pointed out, and then he got out, right? But that's really what we're looking for. We're looking for this way out, and we try it, of course, right? We try it through money, we try it through relationships, we try it through whatever it may be. And, again and again, it's like I don't know about you, but you butt your head up against the wall. And it's kind of like Einstein said, you can't solve the problem on the level of consciousness that it was created. We're trying to go after it through a rational mind, when we need to realize that the way out of all of those troubles is to turn back within. And that therein lies the power and the blessing of yoga. And here, when we talk about yoga, we don't mean the postures, right? We mean soul union, scientific union, that there is a way. That's what the scriptures say, that from joy you came, from joy you live, and from that joy you will melt again. And so we have sort of the masters of happiness, so to speak, that they have realized that truth. And they can say from the depths of their being that this is the way that you can be happy. It sounds like such a strange philosophy, doesn't it? Be happy all the time, no matter what's going outwardly, and yet that it's the even-minded and cheerful. But it's not that they don't feel pain and suffering, but the pain and suffering that Christ felt, right, on that cross wasn't for himself. It was that people just spurn that truth. They spurn that teaching. They turn away from it. But if we can learn to revere it, to love it, to know that it is the truth, and meaning that your experience, it's not anything that anyone today will tell you, but the truth is It's your experience of God within you. It's your experience of that happy place, right? That place that's beyond all of the dualities of life. Yogananda's poem, Samadhi. Actually, this chant we sang, this is a line from that poem. From joy I came for joy, I live in sacred joy, I melt again. But his poem, it starts about the duality of life. Vanished the veils of light and shade, lifted every vapor of sorrow. Think, you have to meditate on these things. Like, what would it feel like that all your sorrows, that they just disperse away? Vanished the veils of light and shade, lifted every vapor of sorrow.
Sailed away.
Sailed away, thank you. All dawns of fleeting joy. And then I wanted to get to this part. I needed to remember to
Dawn
lead
to
up.
dim.
Life, disease, health, death. Perished these false shadows on the screen of duality. You see, it's life and death. It's all this. It's a play. But we can't just say, oh, it's all a play. It's all God's play. It's all His dream. But yeah, it is His dream. But we're caught in the dream. We have to wake up from the dream. The way to wake up from the dream isn't to get more and more despair in the dream. That's why it's to the saints are reaching out. The masters are reaching out. They're on the boat, and they're on solid ground, maybe better said. And they're saying, come back into this solid ground of the joy of God, the love of God. Rest in God, this place where you know that none of those dualities can touch you. And it is that truth that will set us all free.
Well, I figured that you've probably heard a lot of sharing throughout the day, so we only have about 10 minutes. So if anyone has questions, we would love to take questions or any comments from the day that you'd maybe like more elaboration on. Swamiji asked Master questions all the time. And it's the reason that we have so much, just a vastness of information. It's because Swamiji asked him these questions. If not, then what would we have? We wouldn't have necessarily 150 books of this wisdom. So Swami was doing this radio interview, and there were some plants in the audience, and we were supposed to come with questions. Fabia, you should have been there. So I had this question for Swamiji. I said, what is the difference? And I knew I'd heard the question asked before. I had heard Swamiji answer this question before, but it never really got in there for me. It never became a real realization. I said, what's the difference between personal and impersonal love? And because every time I heard impersonal love, I thought of cold and aloof and indifferent and shut down. And so I wanted to hear Swamiji answer. He looked at me and he said, the whole spiritual path is getting out of the ego. And I was like, okay. He said that impersonal love is not at all cold and indifferent. It's that impersonal love is not seeking anything in return. This is what Narayan was sharing about not seeking happiness in the world, because the world is, no thing is going to give us what we're seeking. Okay, so back to the ego. The ego is what gets activated when you're driving down the freeway, somebody cuts you off, slams on their brakes, and you're like, oh my God, or when somebody just blasts you for seemingly no reason. What did I do? I didn't deserve that. God, what's wrong with you? Well, if we can turn that around and say, whoa, what's in me that's having this response? It's just my ego. If we want to overcome the ego, if we want to progress on the spiritual path, we want to transcend the ego. So if we can make it a response that as soon as we start to have that reaction, what is it in me that's having this reaction? It's my ego. I want to annihilate my ego. So thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to let me see that I still have an ego that still gets upset, that still gets, drawn into reactions. And now what can I do? How can I respond in a way as if I didn't have an ego? That's been a really helpful little trick for me, is how would I respond if I had no ego? If I had no thought of, well, okay, if I respond this way, then maybe it's going to make that person feel like they should treat me that way all the time. Maybe it'll make me look like a doormat, You know what? Not really. Master said, Yoganandaji said, don't be a doormat. It's very rare in the West that if you're a reactive person, that you're going to be a doormat. It's not likely. Now, if you're a person that struggles with abuse and things like that, then yes, you do have to have a strong aura. You have to have a strong identity of self before you can transcend the little self. But a lot of times it's that we need to look at what is having this reaction within me. Is it my soul self that just feels a complete oneness with everything and everyone? Probably not. And so from that place, we can say, I don't want to be miserable. I don't want to be stuck in my ego. So I'm grateful for this opportunity to rise above the situation and come at it from a totally different perspective, which is usually, I bet this person is going through a really difficult time right now. What can I do to make him or her feel better? How can I bring some light, some peace, some sense of calmness to this person? As soon as we have that switch of not like, what is this doing to me? This is really hurting me. This is really uncomfortable for me. If we make it about the other person, suddenly everyone can benefit from the situation, and it can actually be a really beautiful, growing experience.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I would just add one thought, that if you can try and bring some levity those times where you feel you get caught, some humor, something that is just shakes you out of the lock hold that you got on the situation, because we're caught in that whirlpool, and just sometimes to pull ourselves out. Humor is great. I was thinking we should have a show. Do you remember that Let Go My Ego? There's this thing, Let Go. I was thinking, is it ego or ego? Does someone have hold of your ego, or is it your ego? You just do something just to get yourself not thinking. It's like they would do those, the koans or whatever they were called in Zen. What's the sound of one hand clapping? Sometimes you got to do things that just break your habitual rational mind response to it, to get out of it, and then from there, always, of course, this is great. Good company is the best medicine.
And now I have a question.
We have time for one more question.
If suppose somebody hurting you purposely, if in front of everybody, like something your weak point, like suppose I can't sing, but I trying my best. If somebody said something, and I cannot say anything in front of everybody, I went back home, that thought comes all night, why she told me like that? I didn't do anything bad to her. Why she was bad to me? And then I have to cry, couple of nights, that thinking comes. No, like, oh, I didn't do anything bad. I was doing my job, or yeah, I'm trying to best. Unnecessarily she hurt me. That things comes in my mind, and I cannot sleep. And then I feeling hurt myself. Okay, what to do?
Yeah. Thank you. You know, just when you said the public humiliation
Yes.
is what you're talking about. And it's interesting, if we read about Yogananda's life with his guru, Swami Sri Yukteswar, constant public humiliation. And that was what he did, right? That's what Sri Yukteswar did. And that's why Yogananda described his ashram as a revolving door, that, you know, very few disciples could stay. Because how did he describe it? It was like he knocked out every tooth of, yeah, but painful, you know. And this is for a master who is sharing with us how public humiliation, though it is destroying the ego, is not easy. It's not easy to deal with, to cope with, right?
Like we are normal person. We are not like a saint or something.
Right.
So we cannot say anything. You know?
It's good to not say anything at the time, because a reaction in the moment is only going to inflame the situation. So better to hold it inside, and as Swamiji counseled, to not respond until you can do so from a place of calmness within. Because as long as our emotions are disturbed, which if you're sad, if you're angry, you're upset, you're hurt, all of that is disturbed emotion. That's the heart's energy, the feeling nature being distorted. When the heart is calm and there's almost a feeling of being like a third person, seeing the situation, you can see it was not kind for that person to say that in that moment. You can observe the situation without getting into, but why? Why me? You know, that's so terrible. It's so awful. You know, if you can see it and you can respond to it inwardly with calmness and come to a place of stillness, then is an appropriate time to bring it back to that person and say, you know, it hurt my feelings when you said that. You know, but from a place of calmness, because you don't want to suppress, because suppression, as Krishna says, to what avail is suppression in the Gita. So if you keep pushing it down, oh, I shouldn't say anything, I should rise above it, I should be better than this. If you keep suppressing, it comes out in a volcano of explosion. It's not pretty. So Eleanor can relate. We can all relate, because we've all done it. We've all tried to suppress, or we've just reacted. So you have like kind of the two spectrums is somebody says something mean to me, I blow up, I explode in their face so that they'll never do it to me again. The other person says, it was so terrible, I'm going to keep it inside, I'm going to hold on to this forever, I'm going to never feel like I can ever sing again in my life, and it's all me. They become self-absorbed. So one is lashing out, one is self-absorption and suppression. Neither are the right way to deal with it. It has to be a balance of coming to calmness, processing, interiorizing, what is maybe my place in this situation? What's my part in this story? Did I say something unkind to her at some point in her life? Maybe there's something within me that needs to get a little smack here because of some karma. Whatever it may
It can be a blessing of, you know, it's like in a community, everyone has rough edges, and it's like a tumbler. You know, you throw stones into a tumbler, and then they become these polished gems. So you can have, gratitude. It's hit up against a sensitive spot for me. And then how can I use my will to do something rather than self-absorption and why me, do something expansive, do something kind for that person. Or if you can't do it for that person, do it for another person. Just get something to get your energy moving more expansively versus contractively.